In The Shock of the Anthropocene, a book by Christophe Bonneuil and Jean-Philippe Frézot, we are told that geologists and climate scientists all around the globe are warning us of a new geological epoch we are entering, the Anthropocene. An epoch shaped by human intervention. Not only a climate crisis threatens us, but this whole new Anthropocene does. From manufactured consent to a consumerist and ignorant society. To say the least, this book is very eye-opening, but beyond the explanation to how we've come here, sea levels are rising, ecosystems are threatened, our cities are riddled with cars, and we are still aiming for growth in a world with finite resources. Seriously, human production has come to a point where we are completely above nature, dominating it. We play God. As a result, we are creating metabolic rifts in the Earth's natural cycles. The cycles of carbon, the cycles of water, and more importantly, all major ecosystems are at risk because of our human activity. And so as a result, we cause irreparable damage to the Earth that gave life to us, all in the name of, well, infinite growth with finite resources. Welcome to capitalism. Deep Ecology was coined by eco-philosopher Arne Naes in 1972 during the Third World Future Research Conference in Romania. For short, his school of thought emphasizes the interconnectedness of all living beings and the necessity of prioritizing the well-being of the entire biosphere over human interests. This approach considers that every living being or plant has intrinsic value and must be respected as such. The core idea is simple. Ecology can be split into two different schools of thought: shallow and deep ecology, much like how political economy can be split into broad schools of thoughts. The shallow, which is the social democrats, the liberals, the conservatives, this false dichotomy between the Republicans and the Democrats in the US, or deep analysis of the social and political systems that are surrounding us. This is the kind of dichotomy we're working with. So, as I was saying, the former, shallow ecology, works inside of established systems, such as aiming for planting trees or selling carbon credits, versus deep ecology. The latter, deep ecology, questions our fundamental values and aims for a very large paradigm shift. This is not necessarily in the way we think, because a Marxist understanding of historical and dialectical materialism usually brings us to the idea that scientific socialism is inherently an industrial society. More broadly, Marxism, as it has been understood for the past centuries, has been distinctively anthropocentrist, geared toward the liberation of the working class, the oppressed people of the earth. But does it only have to apply to humans? Deep ecology rejects the idea that humans are superior to other forms of life and instead advocate for a holistic approach to environmental protection. This means that human interests should not take precedence over those of other species, and that preserving the ecosystem as a whole should be the priority. Now, this philosophy is not inherently anti-human. On the contrary, as human beings, we have a duty to self-preservation, to protect our own before anything else. So, advocates of deep ecology, myself included, call for an approach based on conservation and environmental restoration rather than a purely utilitarian approach to the environment. This is a core tenet of the worldview at the base of sustainable territorial development, DDT in French. We must review our relationship with our environment in a way that doesn't place us as dominators of nature. Nature should be worthy of preservation by itself, not because of its deferred usefulness to mankind. Urban planning should therefore strive for a symbiotic relationship between humans and natural elements. We must therefore prioritize degrowth, encourage viable alternatives to driving, and reshape cities in a way that allows us to live without cars, restore wetlands and endangered ecosystems, and of course run over the local golf club, throw seed bombs all over the place, and force the owners of this land to perform manual labor for once in their life, aka restoring the wetlands they destroyed. What I'm trying to express is the following. Solarpunk cities are the future. They should be what we strive for, our utopia. There's very real ways a socialist society could be organized that doesn't favor the environment before anything else. Of course, the mode of production wouldn't be for infinite production and infinite profit, but it could still be really anthropocentrist and geared toward still the expansion of society over and over again, the reproduction of a socialist mode of production, and without necessarily the protection of biodiversity. That's what I'm saying. So, symbiotic coexistence, degrowth, clean energy, abolition of fossil capitalism, a free, democratic, and egalitarian communist society, all elements that would propulse humanity towards a new chapter of existence. Finally, anyone who accepts these positions as facts must contribute to these changes. The revolution will not be televised, and it sure as hell won't happen without revolutionaries. In my honest opinion, the hypocrisy of classic environmentalist left-wing movements is definitely in their anthropocentrism. Of course, there's way more issues we need to discuss, but I think this one's pretty important. One of the mainly explanatory frameworks of the left is the position of the dominant versus the dominated. Humans are a minority among Earth's inhabitants, yet we are the primary contributors to its degradation. We impose ourselves like a plague, dominating all other species, especially through cattle farming. Most of Earth's land is used for cattle farming or growing crops for cattle farming, using industrial and barbaric methods to domesticate other species such as cows with forced breeding, pigs, chickens, name it, we've done it. That being said, according to this explanatory framework, the human position as a dominator should clearly be denounced by the left. It's kind of hypocritical to continue justifying the subjugation of other species while praising equality. The field of political theory, be it right-wing or left-wing, in all its dimensions has always been largely anthropocentric, as it concerns, by definition, human action in its social and collective dimension. And I don't necessarily blame us for it. As human beings, it is simply natural to put our own species before another. The problem, though, comes when we leave this state of nature to position ourselves as dominators and destroy other species with unnatural means. Even works such as the Political Ideology Manual by Danik and Jan Parenteau defines the two types of environmentalist ideologies: anthropocentric and ecocentric, defining ecocentrism as a more radical in its view of humans as merely part of a vast biosphere. Now, considering that the main premise of environmentalism is that the planet is facing an unprecedented environmental crisis caused by human activity due to the overuse of land, depletion of natural resources, pollution from overconsumption, and massive pressure on flora, fauna, and natural habitats through constant urbanization, humans are definitely responsible for this relentless environmental degradation. Seeing humans as the reason for preserving the environment becomes contradictory and contrary to the very premise of ecological ideology. So, to put it shortly, a utilitarian approach to environmentalism is comical. To return to the two described currents, now the difference lies in the position that humans occupy within nature. The anthropocentric current is very moderate and believes that nature deserves respect only because it is essential to maintaining human life, disregarding the natural right of all other species to life and dignity. It implements only moderate environmental policies, such as carbon taxes and pollution regulations, showing a certain lack of willingness to act against the climate crisis. On the other hand, the ecocentric current places nature at the center of concerns, not for its utility to human survival, but as an end in itself. Since nature is a totality within which humans live, we are merely a part of this cosmos. The current of ecocentrism illustrates a biosphere where terrestrial nature represents a gigantic living organism capable of self-regulation. I think that applying a utilitarian logic to nature is pretentious and selfish. The most shameful aspect is that this purely scientific thought, which disregards human pretension, is considered radical, when in fact it is the same philosophy that formed the way of life of indigenous peoples in the Americas, who lived in harmony with their natural environment prior to being brutally colonized. This point is well illustrated by the first article of the Deep Ecology platform. The well-being and flourishing of human and non-human life on Earth have intrinsic value. These values are independent of the usefulness of the non-human world for human purposes. So the logical conclusion of ecocentrism is deep ecology, which simply makes the observation that humans must radically change their lifestyle and consumption habits to slow down the climate crisis and preserve as many ecosystems as possible. From this emerges left-wing ecocentrism or left biocentrism, which leads us to degrowth ecology. This school of thought is, in good standing against ecofascism, and it is entirely compatible with an anti-Malthusian demographic vision. Overpopulation is not the issue. It's a natural phenomenon that tends to balance itself. We're gonna hit a plateau one day. The point is that we are organized in a capitalist society that is not sustainable. Neo-Malthusianism suggests that the world has reached its demographic limit and can no longer sustain more people, arguing that famine, disease, and poverty are the results of population growth, surpassing Earth's carrying capacity. Neo-Malthusians advocate for population control through birth control and family planning to address these issues. However, this theory has been criticized for its deterministic approach, ignorance of socioeconomic and cultural factors, and the negative effects of population control policies in a lot of cases. Maximizing human suffering to minimize our ecological impact is one of the worst possible solutions to the climate crisis. So, the first step in deconstructing this Malthusian position lays in the field of demographics, the study of population. In fact, a quick glance at a chart of the demographic transition paired with the population pyramid of every industrialized country shows that we are headed toward a plateau at around 9 or 10 billion people. There are 4 steps to this transition. So the first, illustrated by Niger in 1977, which had a perfect pyramid shape, paired with incredible population growth despite a low standard of living and sanitation. The second stage can be well illustrated with Tajikistan's current situation, where the pyramid becomes a sort of bulb with a strong active population and a slightly decreased youth. Most countries are in the next one, so the third stage, like Argentina, with a narrowing base that starts to resemble a parenthesis, while countries like Japan are in the fourth stage with a declining population. While the imperial core continues its demographic transition, eventually losing a significant part of its population due to aging, Africa and a lot of its countries like Nigeria will still be in their strong growth stages. The late 2090s is when their plateau and the world population will even out. There's no overpopulation issue, only problems at the level of capitalism destroying the planet in the name of profits, and the allocation of resources shifted exponentially towards a minority of the world's population. What we face is a global distribution issue that results from hundreds of years of colonialism and imperialism, gutting the global south and further enriching the imperial core. Alright, so why is capitalism exactly this big boogeyman? Well, because our market systems operate on competition to see which capitalist can generate the most profits. 85% of the economy is powered by fucking fossil fuels, which are the least expensive option for corporations to still make a profit. If we have 2 capitalists competing against each other, say capitalist A and B both use fossil fuels, and one of them starts to use green energy instead, he's going to lose competition to the other one solely because his profit margin will be slimmer than his antagonists. We cannot save our environment within capitalism, as huge corporations will always try to maximize their profit margin on that path, destroying the environment. The way to change this is to plan production. Rather to have the market system to determine and dictate production, you have a rational system of production and distribution based on planning by a big computer. The good old big computer that we use against the ECP argument. Of course, smaller industries may have small or medium-scale enterprises within a private sector. Nationalizing the housing industry is also a great must for sustainable urban development. We can't just convince developers to, add a lot of social housing in a coherent fashion without them putting it in the weirdest fucking spot and then disregarding everything else they're gonna want to minimize their costs and maximize their revenues for this building they're developing. So how exactly do we combine Marxism and deep ecology into Deep Ecology Marxism? It's pretty simple. 1. Communism. 2. Degrowth. That's it. Marxism isn't inherently incompatible with deep ecological currents such as ecocentrism. You might think that only anarchists have those views, but no. Marxism is a tool that enables us to analyze and understand the world around us, as well as the development of societies through a materialist lens. None of these inherently prone polluting industrialism and endless growth. They aim to tackle core contradictions of capitalism, that is, infinite growth on finite resources. But the thing is, we don't know what socialism or stateless communism stage will look like, because right now we're still in the claws of capitalism and we're facing total and utter destruction. It doesn't matter the disagreements we have on how socialism should be implemented, when this can be discussed at length during post-revolution councils. And also, the world isn't a monolith, and different policies and means of organization work differently. I hope this was informative, and I hope even more that it convinced even just one of you that biodiversity is a great strength, and we must plan our cities and the mode of production accordingly. So I'm gonna go pet my cat now.